The great chamber stretched out like a metal ocean. Ambassador Marcus Reed stood alone on the small platform in the center. Above him, hundreds of alien faces looked down from curved balconies that rose up like steps on a mountain. Some had eyes like jewels. Others had no eyes at all. The air hummed with the sound of translator machines working in dozens of languages. Marcus kept his face calm, but his heart was beating fast. He had known this day would come. Earth had made too many enemies. Humans had expanded too quickly across the galaxy. They had built cities on worlds that some aliens called holy. They had mined asteroids that others claimed as graves for their ancestors. The massive screen above the chamber showed the final count. Red numbers glowed like fire against the dark background. 847 votes for banishment. Only 3 votes against. The silence in the chamber was complete. Council Leader Vexitar stepped forward. The tall, blue-skinned alien raised one of his forearms. His voice echoed through the chamber without need for translation. All species in the galaxy had learned to understand the old tongue of the Council. The vote is complete, Vexitar announced. The species known as humanity is hereby banished from galactic civilization. All human colonies beyond the Sol system must be abandoned within 30 rotations. All human ships must return to Earth space. Any human found beyond these boundaries after the deadline will be considered an enemy of all civilized worlds. Marcus nodded slowly. He had expected this. Earth's intelligence services had been watching the vote counts for weeks. The decision had been made long before today's ceremony. He looked up at the alien faces surrounding him. Some showed satisfaction. Others looked worried. A few seemed almost sad. Do you accept these terms? Vexitar asked. I accept them on behalf of Earth, Marcus replied. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Humanity will comply with the Council's decision. The alien council members began talking among themselves. Their translator devices filled the air with a dozen different languages. Marcus could hear bits of conversation. Some aliens were already discussing how to divide up the valuable human colonies. Others were making plans to strip mine the abandoned settlements. But Marcus was not listening to their words. He was watching the small device on his wrist. It showed green lights for all of humanity's major colonies. Bright, steady green lights that meant everything was working normally. Food production, power generation, defense systems, communication arrays. All normal. Then as he watched, the lights began changing. One by one they turned red. Not the angry red of danger or attack. The soft red that meant operational shutdown complete. New Boston Colony went red. Then Kepler Station. Then the mining worlds of the Outer Rim. One by one, every human settlement in the galaxy showed the same status. Shutdown complete. Marcus almost smiled, but he kept his face serious. The aliens had no idea what they were looking at. To them, human technology was still primitive. They could not read the signals that humans used to talk to each other across space. They did not know about the secret communication networks that Earth had built over the past 50 years. While the Council had been debating humanity's fate, something else had been happening. Every human colony in the galaxy had received the same message at the same moment. 3 words that changed everything. Phoenix Protocol activated. The plan had been ready for years. Earth's leaders had always known this day might come. Humans were too different from the other species in the galaxy. Too aggressive, too curious, too willing to take risks. It was only a matter of time before the other races decided that humans were too dangerous to keep around. So Earth had prepared. Every human colony had secret evacuation plans. Every settlement had hidden supply caches and emergency equipment. Most importantly, every human outpost had been built with a simple rule in mind. If the galaxy ever turned against humanity, humans would disappear so completely that it would be like they had never existed at all. The chamber was getting louder. Alien voices rose as they discussed the practical details of humanity's banishment. Who would take control of the abandoned colonies? How would they divide up the human trade routes? What would they do with all the empty ships and stations? Marcus listened to their planning with interest. They were making a lot of assumptions. They assumed that humans would simply pack up and leave like defeated refugees. They assumed that Earth's colonies were just like alien settlements, built to stay in one place forever. They assumed that humanity's technology was limited to what the Council had been allowed to see. All of their assumptions were wrong. Council Leader Vexitar raised his hand again. The chamber fell silent. Ambassador Reed, you have 30 rotations to complete the evacuation. Any delay will be considered an act of war against the galactic community. There will be no delays, Marcus replied. In fact, I believe most of our people have already begun the process. This was not quite the truth, but it was not quite a lie either. The evacuation had begun, but not in the way the aliens expected. Human colonies were not packing up their belongings and climbing aboard slow transport ships. They were doing something much more efficient. They were vanishing. Marcus touched his wrist device again. Now all the lights showed the same message. Phase 1 complete. Awaiting Phase 2 authorization. He looked up at the curved balconies full of alien faces. In a few months, they would realize their mistake. They would understand that banishing humanity was not the end of a problem. It was the beginning of a much bigger one. But for now, they were happy. They thought they had won. Marcus made a small bow toward the council leader. If there is nothing else, I request permission to return to Earth and oversee the evacuation personally. Vextar waved one of his hands in dismissal. You may go. Remember, 30 rotations. Not one day longer. Marcus walked toward the chamber's main exit. His footsteps echoed in the vast space. Behind him, the aliens were already starting their celebration. They did not notice when he activated his hidden communicator just before reaching the door. The message he sent was very short. Only 5 words. Phoenix Protocol is active. Ghost. Within hours, that message would reach every human ship, station, and outpost beyond Earth's solar system. It would tell them that the masquerade was over. No more pretending to be simple traders and explorers. No more following alien laws and customs. No more asking permission to exist. The galaxy had voted to banish Earth. They wanted humanity gone. They were going to get exactly what they asked for, but probably not in the way they expected. As Marcus walked through the station's corridors toward his ship, he thought about the coming months. The aliens would search for humans and find only empty colonies. They would celebrate their victory over the dangerous species that had threatened their peaceful galaxy. They would have no idea that somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity was preparing for something that had never been tried before, something that would change the galaxy forever. The vote was over. The real game was just beginning, and humanity was very good at games. The galaxy voted to banish Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told. Twice Captain Lisa Torres stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the landing pad of New Vancouver Colony. The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty platform. Her boots made small clicking sounds on the metal surface. Behind her, 6 members of the Galactic Patrol team followed in single file. The colony should have been buzzing with activity. 2 million humans had lived here just 6 months ago. The morning shift should be starting at the factories. Children should be walking to school. The air should be filled with the sounds of a busy city waking up. Instead, there was only silence. Lisa activated her scanner and swept it across the nearby buildings. Life signs showed 0. Energy readings were normal. All systems appeared to be running perfectly. It was like finding a car with the engine running but no driver inside. This is weird, said Officer Jake Martinez, her second in command. He was reading his own scanner with a confused expression. The power grid is active. Water systems are running. Even the garbage collection robots are still working. But there are no people anywhere. Lisa nodded. This was the 5th abandoned human colony they had investigated in the past month. All of them showed the same pattern. Perfect infrastructure, 0 population. It was like the humans had simply evaporated into thin air. She opened her communicator to contact the patrol ship in orbit. Torres to Starlight. We are beginning the ground investigation. Preliminary scans show the same situation as the previous sites. The voice of Commander Nash crackled through the speaker. Understood, Torres. Be careful down there. Something about these empty human colonies gives me a bad feeling. Lisa understood what he meant. The abandoned colonies were not just empty. They felt wrong somehow. Like walking through a house where the owners had just stepped out for a moment, but knowing they would never come back. The team moved into the main city center. Their footsteps echoed between tall buildings made of gleaming metal and glass. Streetlights were still working. Information displays showed current weather. The galaxy voted to banish Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told twice, and news updates from 6 months ago. A fountain in the central plaza bubbled cheerfully, its water crystal clear. Look at this, called Officer Park from near a shopping center. The automatic doors still work. The lights inside are on. There are still products on the shelves. It looks like people just stopped shopping in the middle of the day. Lisa walked over to examine the shop. Park was right. There were half-filled shopping carts sitting in the aisles. Fresh food had rotted away months ago, but the automatic cleaning systems had removed the mess. Now the shelves were perfectly organized, waiting for customers who would never return. Her communicator buzzed with an incoming message. It was not from their ship. The signal was coming from somewhere else in the galaxy. All units, this is Admiral Korath of the Xanthari fleet. We have a priority alert. 3 major trade routes in the Outer Rim have gone completely silent. The cargo ships carrying food and medical supplies to 14 worlds have not arrived at their destinations. We need all available patrol units to investigate immediately. Lisa frowned. Missing cargo ships were a serious problem. The Outer Rim worlds depended on regular supply runs to survive. If the ships were not reaching their destinations, people could die. She activated her communicator to respond. Torres here. My team is currently investigating the new Vancouver site. Should we abandon this mission to assist with the missing ships? Negative, Admiral Korath replied. Continue your investigation. But be aware that all the missing ships were traveling through sectors that formerly contained human colonies. There may be a connection. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She looked around at the empty city with new eyes. What if the human colonies were not as abandoned as they appeared? What if something was still here, watching and waiting? The team spent the next 4 hours searching buildings and recording data. Every apartment building was empty but maintained. Every office complex was clean but lifeless. The schools still had lessons planned on their computer systems. The hospital still had medicine in their storage rooms, but there were no people anywhere. As evening approached, Lisa decided to check one more location before returning to the ship. The colony's central communication center was a large building near the spaceport. If there were any clues about what happened to the humans, that would be the most likely place to find them. The building's main entrance opened automatically when they approached. Inside, banks of computers hummed quietly, processing data that no one would ever read. Multiple screens displayed star charts, weather patterns, and communication logs from across the galaxy. Lisa walked over to the main communication console. The screen showed hundreds of messages that had been received after the colony was evacuated. Most were routine business communications. Some were messages from family members on other worlds, asking why no one was answering their calls. But at the bottom of the list was something different, a message that had arrived just 3 days ago. It was marked as high priority, encrypted with military-grade security. The sender was listed only as Wanderer Fleet Command. Lisa tried to open the message, but her security clearance was not high enough. However, she could see the first line of text in the preview window. Phase 2 preparation is complete. All deep space construction sites are operational and ready for population transfer. Awaiting final orders from Earth Command. Lisa stared at the message for a long moment. Deep space construction sites? Population transfer? What were the humans building out there in the darkness between stars? Her thoughts were interrupted by Officer Martinez calling from across the room. Captain, you need to see this. I found something in the long-range sensor logs. Lisa walked over to Martinez's station. He had pulled up sensor data from the past 6 months, showing energy readings from the space around the colony. Look at this, Martinez said, pointing at the screen. 3 days after the colony was evacuated, there was a massive energy spike. Something big was using power out there in deep space, and it was not any kind of energy signature that we have in our databases. Lisa studied the readings. Martinez was right. The energy pattern was completely unknown. It was far more powerful than anything that humans were supposed to be able to build, and it had appeared in an area of space that was supposed to be empty. Can you track where the energy was coming from? She asked. Martinez worked at the controls for a few minutes. I can give you a general direction. The signal was coming from outside the galaxy, beyond the outer rim. Whatever made that energy burst, it was very, very far away. Lisa felt a growing sense of unease. The humans had not simply disappeared. They had gone somewhere specific, and they were building something out there in the void between galaxies. Her communicator buzzed again. This time it was a priority message from Galactic Council headquarters. All patrol units, this is an emergency bulletin. We have received a coded transmission from beyond the galactic rim. The message appears to be of human origin. It contains only 4 words. The Wanderer fleet is ready. All units are ordered to report any unusual activity in their sectors immediately. Lisa exchanged glances with her team members. The Wanderer fleet. The same name from the encrypted message they had found in the communication center. She activated her communicator to contact their ship. Torres to Starlight. We have found some important information down here. I recommend we return to headquarters immediately to make a full report. Understood, Commander Nash replied. But Torres, there is something else you should know. While you were investigating the colony, our long-range sensors detected something strange. There are energy signatures appearing all along the galactic rim. Dozens of them. Whatever the humans are doing out there, it is big. Lisa looked around the empty communication center one last time. The humans had not been banished from the galaxy. They had chosen to leave, and they had been planning their departure for a very long time. The question now was what they intended to do next. As the team prepared to leave the building, Lisa noticed something she had missed before. Written in small letters on the wall near the main entrance was a simple message. We are not gone. We are just getting started. The words sent a shiver down her spine. Whatever game the humans were playing, it was far from over. The galaxy voted to banish Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told. Twice Trade Coordinator Nixara stood before the holographic display in her office, watching red warning lights spread across the galaxy like a disease. Each light represented a supply shortage, a failed trade route, or a missing cargo shipment. 8 months ago, there had been only a few scattered problems. Now nearly a quarter of all galactic trade had been disrupted. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. Human colonies had produced 23% of the galaxy's rare minerals and 31% of advanced technology components. Without those resources, entire civilizations were starting to struggle. Her assistant, a young Corvani named Telwyn, entered the office carrying a stack of urgent reports. His normally blue skin had turned pale with stress. The situation is getting worse, Telwyn said, placing the reports on her desk. The Alderaan system is reporting critical shortages of medical supplies. The Vegan Trade Federation says they cannot meet their food production quotas without human-manufactured farming equipment, and 17 more cargo ships have gone missing in the past week. Nixara picked up one of the reports and scanned it quickly. The missing ships were all traveling through space that had once contained human colonies. Ships would enter those areas and simply vanish. Sometimes their emergency beacons would activate briefly, but by the time rescue teams arrived, they found nothing. Have we learned anything new about what is happening to these ships? She asked. Telwyn shook his head. The search teams find no debris, no signs of attack, no distress signals. The ships just disappear. But there have been some strange reports from the few crews who have survived encounters in those areas. Nixara looked up with interest. What kind of reports? They describe seeing ships that match no known designs. Fast, silent vessels that appear without warning and vanish just as quickly. Some crews report that their ship's systems were scanned by unknown technology before they were allowed to leave. Across the galaxy, bounty hunter Cale Voss was having similar thoughts as he studied the contract displayed on his ship's main screen. The payment was enormous. More money than he usually made in a year. All he had to do was investigate one of the ghost zones where ships had been disappearing and report back on what he found. The client was anonymous, but the payment was real. And Cale needed the money badly. His ship, the Iron Wolf, was getting old and expensive to maintain. His crew of 3 was starting to ask questions about when they would get their next big payday. "Boss," called Rita Webb from the pilot's seat. "We are approaching the coordinates. This is where the cargo hauler Bright Star was last seen 2 weeks ago." Cale moved to the main sensor station and activated the scanning systems. The area looked empty. No ships, no space stations, no asteroids big enough to hide behind. Just empty void with a few distant stars providing dim light. "Run a detailed scan," he ordered. "Look for anything that should not be here. Energy signatures, metal debris, unusual radiation patterns." Rita worked at the controls for several minutes. "I am getting something strange, boss." "There are structures out there, but they are almost impossible to see. Some kind of stealth technology that makes them nearly invisible to our sensors." On the screen, ghostly outlines began to appear as the computer processed the sensor data. Cale felt his breath catch in his throat. There were dozens of objects floating in the darkness. Some looked like space stations. Others were clearly defensive platforms with weapon arrays. All of them were dark and silent. "Those are human designs," said Tom Krieger, the ship's engineer. "But they are not like anything humans were supposed to be able to build. Those defensive platforms are at least 3 times larger than anything in the Galactic Council's database." Kale studied the display with growing unease. The abandoned human colony was supposed to be empty, but clearly something was still here. Something that was watching the space around the dead world and taking action against ships that got too close. "Rita, get us out of here slowly," he ordered. "No sudden movements. And keep our weapons powered down. I do not want to appear threatening." As they began to move away from the ghost structures, Kale's communication system came alive with an incoming message. The signal was strong and clear, but the sender was not showing up on any of their sensors. "Unknown vessel, you are trespassing in restricted space. State your purpose and prepare to be scanned." The voice was human, male with a slight accent that Kale could not place, but according to their sensors, there were no human ships anywhere in the area. "This is Captain Kale Voss of the Iron Wolf," he replied carefully. "We are investigating the disappearance of several cargo vessels in this region. We mean no harm." There was a long pause before the voice responded. "Captain Voss, you are advised to leave this area immediately. These waters are no longer safe for unauthorized vessels." "What happened to the missing ships?" Kale asked. Another pause. Then the voice said something that made Kale's blood run cold. "They were given the same warning you are receiving now. Some chose to listen. Others did not." On the sensor display, new contacts were appearing. Ships that had not been there moments before were materializing out of the darkness. Sleek predatory vessels that moved with impossible grace and speed. "Boss," Rita said in a tight voice, "I count 8 ships closing on our position. Their design does not match anything in our database, and their energy signatures are off the charts." Kale had been a bounty hunter for 15 years. He had faced pirates, smugglers, and military vessels from dozens of species. But he had never seen ships that moved like these. They seemed to flow through space like living things, adjusting their course and speed with perfect coordination. "We are leaving," he announced to his crew. "Full power to engines. Get us to the edge of the system as fast as possible." The Iron Wolf accelerated away from the ghost colony, but the mysterious ships kept pace easily. They made no aggressive moves, but their presence was clear. They were escorting Kale's ship out of the area, making sure it did not return. As they reached the edge of the system, the escort ships vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. One moment they were there, the next moment the sensors showed empty space. But the human voice came through the communication system one final time. "Captain Voss, you have seen what happens to those who intrude where they are not welcome. Share this information with your employers. The old rules no longer apply in these regions of space." 3 days later, Kale delivered his report to the anonymous client. The meeting took place in a neutral space station near the galactic core. The client turned out to be a representative of the Galactic Council, though he refused to give his name. "You are telling me that the abandoned human colonies are not actually abandoned?" the representative asked after reading Kale's report. "That is correct," Kale replied. "There are definitely humans still operating in those areas, and they have technology that is far more advanced than anything we have seen before. Ships that can become invisible, weapon systems that we cannot even detect, coordination and response times that suggest artificial intelligence assistance." The representative was quiet for a long time, studying the data that Kale had collected. Finally, he spoke again. "This information changes everything. The Council assumed that banishing the humans would solve the problem of their aggressive expansion. Instead, it appears we have simply given them time and motivation to become more dangerous." Kyle nodded. "There is something else you should know. Before we left, our long-range sensors detected energy signatures coming from beyond the galactic rim. Something big is happening out there in deep space. The humans are not just hiding. They are building something." The Council representative transferred the agreed payment to Kale's account, but his expression was troubled. "The Council will want to investigate this further," he said. "We may need to organize a joint military task force to determine what the humans are really doing." As Kale left the meeting, he could not shake the feeling that the galaxy was heading toward something unprecedented. The humans had been banished because they were considered too dangerous to remain. But exile had not made them weaker. It had made them invisible, and invisible enemies were the most dangerous kind of all. The galaxy voted to banish Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told, twice Commander Blake Harrison. stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, staring at the impossible sight before him. Kepler Station was alive again. The massive orbital platform that had been empty and dark for over a year was now blazing with lights. Ships moved in and out of its docking bays like busy insects around a hive. According to every report he had read, Kepler Station should still be abandoned. The humans had evacuated it 14 months ago, when the galaxy voted for their banishment, but his sensors clearly showed a fully operational space station with thousands of people living and working inside it. "Commander," called Lieutenant Anna Kim from the communication station, "we are receiving a message from Kepler Station. They are inviting us to dock and begin diplomatic discussions." Blake nodded slowly. "Accept their invitation, but keep our shields up and weapons ready. We still do not know what we are dealing with here." The Harmony approached one of the station's smaller docking bays. As they got closer, Blake could see that the structure was different from what he remembered. New sections had been added. The hull was made from materials that seemed to shift and change color as the light hit them. Most striking of all, the station was much larger than it had been before. "How is that possible?" he muttered to himself. "You cannot expand a space station that quickly. It would take years of construction." As they docked, Blake and his small diplomatic team prepared to board the station. He had been chosen for this mission because he had visited Kepler Station many times before the banishment. He knew its layout and had worked with its human administrators on trade agreements. The airlock cycled open, and Blake stepped into a corridor that looked familiar, but felt completely different. The walls were the same basic shape, but they seemed to glow with their own inner light. The air was cleaner and fresher than he remembered, and there was a subtle humming sound that he could not identify. A woman approached them from down the corridor. She was tall and confident, with short dark hair and bright green eyes. Blake recognized her immediately. "Director Michelle Torres," he said with surprise. "I thought you had evacuated with the rest of your people." Michelle smiled warmly. "Commander Harrison, it is good to see you again. And you are correct, we did evacuate. But we have returned and we have brought some improvements with us." She led them through corridors that Blake thought he knew, but everything was subtly different. The lighting was better. The walls seemed to respond to their presence, brightening slightly as they walked past. Through observation windows, Blake could see sections of the station that defied all logic. Gardens that seemed to exist in impossible spaces. Manufacturing areas where robots worked with materials that shimmered like liquid metal. "Director Torres," Blake said carefully, "I have to ask, how did you rebuild this station so quickly? And where did you get the technology for all these improvements?" Michelle paused at an intersection and turned to face him. "Commander, what do you know about time dilation effects near massive gravitational sources?" Blake frowned. "The basic physics. Time moves more slowly when you are close to very large masses. But I do not see what that has to do with your station. During our exile, we established construction facilities near the edge of several black holes," Michelle explained. "Time moved much more slowly for us than it did for the rest of the galaxy. What seemed like 14 months to you was actually closer to 20 years for our engineering teams." Blake felt his mouth drop open. 20 years? That is impossible. "The energy requirements alone would be enormous." Michelle smiled again. "We learned how to harness energy sources that the galaxy has never seen before. Dark matter reactors, quantum field generators, zero-point energy collectors. When you have 20 years to work without interference, you can accomplish amazing things." They entered a large conference room with a view of space through a transparent aluminum window. Blake could see other ships in the distance, but their designs were unlike anything. In his experience, they moved with fluid grace as if they were swimming through space rather than flying through it. "Commander," Michelle said as they took seats around the conference table, "I want to be very clear about something. Humanity is no longer bound by the treaties and agreements that we signed with the Galactic Council. When the galaxy voted to banish us, they broke those contracts. We are now free to establish our own relationships with individual species and civilizations." Blake had been expecting this. "What exactly are you proposing?" Michelle activated a holographic display that showed trade routes, resource flows, and economic data from across the galaxy. The galactic economy has been struggling since human colonies stopped producing rare minerals and advanced components. Food shortages, medical supply problems, technological stagnation. We can solve all of these issues. The display changed to show images of incredible technology, manufacturing systems that could create complex devices in minutes. Agricultural systems that could grow food in environments where nothing should be able to live. Medical technology that could repair injuries that were previously considered permanent. We are willing to share all of this, Michelle continued, but only through direct agreements with individual governments. No more dealing with the Galactic Council as a group. Each species that wants our technology will need to negotiate with us separately. Blake studied the images with growing amazement and concern. The technology was decades ahead of anything the galaxy had ever seen. Maybe centuries ahead. If humanity could really deliver on these promises, they would quickly become the most powerful civilization in known space. What do you want in return? He asked. Simple recognition that humans have the right to exist and expand freely, Michelle replied. No more restrictions on where we can build colonies. No more limits on our population growth. No more interference in our internal affairs. Blake was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the implications. If his government agreed to these terms, they would be breaking with the Galactic Council's decision to banish humanity. Other species might see it as a betrayal, but the benefits were enormous. The technology that Michelle was offering could solve problems that had plagued his civilization for centuries. And if they refused, their competitors would certainly accept the deal instead. I will need to report back to my government, Blake said finally. This is not a decision I can make alone. Michelle nodded. Of course. But Commander, I should mention that you are not our only visitors today. Representatives from 47 different species have requested meetings this week. The galaxy is very interested in what humanity has to offer. As if to prove her point, the communication system announced the arrival of 3 more diplomatic vessels. Blake recognized the ship designs: the Altarian Republic, the Vegan Trade Federation, and the Corvani Empire, 3 of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, all coming to negotiate with the humans they had voted to banish. Blake realized that the balance of power in the galaxy was shifting. The humans had not been weakened by their exile. They had used the time to become stronger than anyone had imagined possible, and now they were back. Michelle escorted Blake and his team back to their ship, but before they left, she handed him a small device. This is a communication relay, she explained. If your government decides to open negotiations, use this to contact us directly. But Commander, I would advise you not to wait too long. We have limited production capacity, and we will be giving priority to the species that approach us first. As the Harmony undocked from Kepler Station, Blake watched through the observation windows as more diplomatic ships arrived. The humans were not seeking revenge for their banishment. They were offering partnership, but only to those who were willing to abandon the old system and embrace a new one. The galaxy that had voted to banish Earth was about to discover that sometimes the best thing you can do for your enemies is give them exactly what they ask for. The galaxy voted to banish Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told. Twice President Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of New Terra Station, looking out through the massive viewing dome at a site that would have been impossible just 2 years ago. Ships from dozens of different species moved in carefully coordinated patterns around the station. Corvani vessels with their distinctive curved hulls worked alongside angular Zenthari cruisers. Vegan trade ships loaded with exotic goods docked next to Altarian research vessels. But the most impressive sight was the station itself. New Terra existed partially outside normal space-time, using technology that humanity had developed during their exile. Parts of the structure seemed to fade in and out of visibility as they shifted between dimensions. Gardens and residential areas occupied spaces that were larger on the inside than they appeared from outside. Elena activated the communication system that would broadcast her message to diplomatic representatives from over 200 civilizations. Not all of them were physically present on the station. Some were attending virtually through quantum communication links that allowed real-time conversation across thousands of light years. Friends and colleagues, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive diplomatic complex. 2 years ago, the galaxy voted to banish humanity from civilized space. Today, I want to tell you why that vote was the greatest gift you could have given us. The assembled diplomats listened in silence. Many of them were from governments that had broken away from the old Galactic Council to establish independent trade relationships with humanity. Others represented species that were still trying to decide which side to choose. Elena walked to a holographic display that showed the current state of galactic civilization. Instead of the old centralized system with the Council at its heart, the galaxy now resembled a complex network with human settlements serving as major connection points. The old system was based on fear, Elena continued. Fear of change, fear of growth, fear of species that developed too quickly or expanded too aggressively. The Council's answer to every problem was to create new restrictions and limitations. The display changed to show economic data from the past 2 years. Trade volume had increased by 40%. Food production was up 60%. Medical technology had advanced more in the past 24 months than it had in the previous century. Humanity offers a different approach. Instead of limiting growth, we accelerate it. Instead of restricting development, we share our innovations freely. Instead of punishing success, we reward cooperation. Elena gestured toward the viewing dome, where a group of mixed-species children could be seen playing in one of the station's recreational areas. Human children ran alongside young Corvani, Altarians, and members of species that had been bitter enemies just a generation ago. This is what we have built together. Not conquest, not domination, but partnership. The galaxy no longer revolves around a single council making decisions for everyone. Instead, we have hundreds of bilateral agreements that allow each species to develop according to its own strengths and interests. The presentation continued for another hour as Elena explained the technical details of humanity's new technologies. Dark matter reactors that provided unlimited clean energy. Quantum manufacturing systems that could create complex devices from raw materials in minutes. Medical nanotechnology that could repair genetic damage and extend lifespans by centuries. But the most impressive innovation was something called the expansion network. Using the space-folding technology that allowed New Terra Station to exist in multiple dimensions, humanity had created a transportation system that connected distant parts of the galaxy instantly. A ship could enter the network near Earth and emerge near the galactic rim in a matter of hours rather than years. The network is open to all of our partner species, Elena explained. Trade that once took months now happens in days. Communication that was limited by the speed of light now occurs in real time across any distance. The galaxy has effectively become smaller, but the opportunities have become limitless. After the formal presentation, Elena met privately with several key diplomatic representatives. The most important meeting was with Ambassador Vextar, the former council leader who had announced humanity's banishment 2 years earlier. Vextar looked older and more tired than Elena remembered. The collapse of the Galactic Council had been hard on the species that had depended on the old system for stability and order. President Rodriguez, Vextar said quietly, I must ask you directly, was this always your plan? Did humanity orchestrate its own banishment in order to justify breaking free from galactic law? Elena considered the question carefully. Ambassador, humanity has been preparing for this possibility since our first contact with galactic civilization. We knew that our rapid expansion and technological development would eventually create fear among the other species. The vote to banish us was inevitable. But you could have slowed down, Vextar protested. You could have accepted the Council's limitations and remained part of the galactic community. Elena shook her head. That would have been a betrayal of everything that makes us human. We are explorers, inventors, builders. Asking us to stop growing is like asking us to stop breathing. The Council system was designed for species that valued stability over progress. Humanity values progress above everything else. She gestured toward the viewing dome, where construction crews were adding another section to the station. We could never have built this under the old restrictions. We could never have developed the expansion network if we had been forced to seek approval from 400 different species for every innovation. The banishment gave us the freedom to become what we were always meant to be. Vextar was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, what happens to the species that choose not to join your network? What happens to those who prefer the old ways? They are welcome to continue as they always have, Elena replied. Humanity has no interest in forcing our system on anyone. But I will be honest with you, Ambassador. The galaxy is changing. Species that embrace innovation and cooperation are prospering. Those that resist change are being left behind. The meeting ended cordially, but Elena could see that Vexitar understood the reality of the situation. The old Galactic Council was becoming irrelevant. Power was shifting to the species that were willing to adapt to the new order. Later that evening, Elena stood alone in her private office, reviewing reports from across the galaxy. 47 major civilizations had now signed partnership agreements with humanity. Another 63 were in active negotiations. The old council still existed, but it represented fewer than 100 species, mostly smaller governments that lacked the resources to modernize their technology. Her assistant, David Park, entered with the day's final report. Madam President, the deep space exploration teams have completed their preliminary survey of the Andromeda Galaxy. The initial results are very promising. Elena smiled as she read the report. Andromeda contained thousands of potentially habitable worlds and several species that appeared to be on the verge of developing space travel technology. It would be humanity's next great project. Schedule a meeting with the expansion committee, she instructed. I want to discuss the timeline for establishing our first intergalactic colonies. As David left to arrange the meeting, Elena returned to the viewing dome. The sight that greeted her there would have been unimaginable 3 years ago. Ships from dozens of species were preparing to depart through the expansion network, carrying cargo, passengers, and ideas to distant corners of the galaxy. But more importantly, several of the ships were heading beyond the galactic rim toward other galaxies entirely. Mixed crews of humans and aliens were about to embark on the greatest exploration mission in the history of known civilization. Elena thought about the words that had been spoken in the council chamber 2 years ago. The species known as humanity is hereby banished from galactic civilization. The council had been right about one thing. Humanity was no longer part of the old galactic civilization. They had created a new one, and this new civilization was not limited to a single galaxy. With the expansion network and their advanced technology, humanity and their allies could reach other galaxies, other dimensions, other possibilities that had never been explored before. The vote to banish Earth had been intended as a punishment. Instead, it had become the first step in the greatest expansion of consciousness and civilization that the universe had ever seen. As Elena watched the ships disappear into the quantum tunnels that led to distant stars, she spoke quietly to herself. They voted to banish Earth from their galaxy. We decided to give them something better, a galaxy worth staying in. But even as she spoke, she knew that the galaxy itself was just the beginning. The universe was vast, filled with countless worlds and civilizations waiting to be discovered, and humanity, no longer bound by the fears and limitations of others, was finally free to explore it all.